Maybe if we all get thirsty, we'll go to Delgado's and get some mezcal.
I lose my star witness, and I can't get a continuance, and I don't care. I'm going up there, I'm going to try it, I'm going to let the jury decide.
Working for you on this ranch, and Daddy, you have had top-grade cheap labor.
There are only so many different facets of your own personality that you can get to, and you find yourself repeating yourself, so it's...
His eyes made him a legend. Ice blue, piercing, the kind of eyes that could sell a movie before the trailer even dropped. But behind that perfect Hollywood image was a man who carried guilt, secrets, and regrets so heavy that not even fame could hide them. Most people remember Paul Newman as the ultimate cool, the rebel in Cool Hand Luke, the hustler who played by his own rules, the heartthrob who somehow never aged. But according to his own words, and what his family has since revealed, that image wasn't the full story. There was another Paul, a man who battled inner demons when the cameras stopped rolling.
And that's what I try to do. Sometimes I lean to one side of it, sometimes I lean to the other.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute, Jody. I'll tell you what I'll do.
A father haunted by what happened to his son, and a husband whose love story, as perfect as it looked, was held together through more pain than anyone realized.
Now, what makes him so big? His big heart, his big belly?
In the end, his daughter says he confessed things on his deathbed that shocked even those closest to him, things that completely change how we see him today. This isn't the story of fame, it's the story of what fame hides. But to understand who Paul Newman really was, we need to go back to where it all began, a small town in Ohio, where a young boy first learned what it meant to feel different. The boy who didn't belong. Paul Leonard Newman was born in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, in 1925, a world away from the glamour he'd one day rule.
I'm the best you ever seen, Fats. I'm the best there is. Even if you beat me, I'm still the best.
That's it. That's the end of it. Man, there's still daylight. What we got here is a failure to communicate.
His childhood looked picture perfect on paper. His parents owned a successful sporting goods store, and money was never really the problem. But belonging? That was a different story. His father, Arthur, was Jewish. His mother, Teresa, was Slovak Catholic. In their neighborhood, that mix stood out. Shaker Heights was mostly Christian, and back then, quiet prejudice wasn't unusual. It was expected. Paul felt it early. He was smart, athletic, and popular enough to fit in, until the moment he couldn't. When his high school fraternity rejected him because of his father's background, the message was brutal and clear. It didn't matter how well he performed. To some people, he would never be one of them. That moment left a mark. Years later, he'd still talk about it, the sting of being shut out for something he couldn't change. It planted something deep inside him, a defiant need to prove himself, but also a distrust of status and power. Even in the middle of his privilege, Paul learned early that people judged by labels, names, looks, religion. Maybe that's why he fought so hard to be seen for who he really was, not just what he looked like. But for all the loneliness, something else was growing. His mother had a flair for the dramatic. She loved stories, plays, and performance. When Paul was just 7, she pushed him to take part in a school production of Robin Hood. It was small, simple, but it changed everything. He found something on that stage: freedom. It wasn't about applause. It was about transformation. He could become anyone he wanted, and for a kid who never fully felt accepted, that was intoxicating. By the time he joined the Cleveland Playhouse's Children's Theater, he had the spark. He didn't yet see acting as a career, not even close, but he knew one thing: it made him feel alive in a way nothing else did. Still, no one could have predicted what was coming next, because just as Paul began dreaming about the future, the world went to war, and fate stepped in to rewrite his story completely. But sometimes destiny hides in disaster, and one twist of luck would save his life. The day luck saved his life. When World War II broke out, Paul Newman was just 17, young, confident, and itching to prove himself. He wasn't the rebellious Hollywood star yet. He was just a kid from Ohio who wanted to fly. He enlisted in the Navy, hoping to become a pilot. But during training, doctors discovered he was colorblind, a small defect that felt like a huge failure at the time. Instead of flying fighter planes, he was reassigned as a radio man, and rear gunner. To him, it felt like a demotion. To fate, it was a detour that saved his life. In 1945, his unit was assigned to the USS Bunker Hill, one of the Navy's most active aircraft carriers. But days before deployment, his pilot developed an ear infection, grounding their crew. Paul was frustrated, angry. He thought he'd been robbed of his chance to prove himself in battle. Then the news came. Just days later, kamikaze pilots struck the Bunker Hill with devastating force. Hundreds of sailors were killed, including men Paul had trained beside. If not for that ear infection, he would have been on board. That realization hit him like a tidal wave. He'd been spared by pure chance, one small twist of timing separating life from death. It changed him forever. He came home decorated but quiet. The medals meant less to him than the miracle he couldn't explain. He didn't talk about it much, but those who knew him said the experience gave him an almost obsessive sense of purpose, like he'd been given a second shot at life and couldn't waste it. When the war ended, he tried to settle back into normal life. He returned to college, studying economics. But the classroom felt too small for someone who had already stared down death. His passion was somewhere else, on stage, where he could chase truth, not numbers. At Kenyon College, he joined the drama club, acting in student plays and small campus productions. It wasn't about fame yet, it was about feeling something real again. Every performance gave him that electric rush, the same rush he felt when he realized he'd survived what so many others hadn't. After graduation, he took over his late father's sporting goods store, trying to do the right thing. But behind the counter, surrounded by shelves of baseball gloves and tennis rackets, he felt trapped. The war had shown him how fragile life was, and he couldn't waste his second chance playing it safe. One night, he made a decision that would change everything. He packed his bags, left Cleveland, and enrolled at the Yale School of Drama. It was bold, risky, maybe even reckless, but Paul Newman wasn't chasing safety anymore. He was chasing purpose. At Yale, he discovered what it meant to act from the inside out. But it wasn't until he moved to New York City and joined the famous Actors Studio that he began to transform from a young dreamer into an artist. Under Lee Strasberg's mentorship, he learned method acting, the emotional deep dive that made his later performances feel so raw, so alive. It was there, in the chaos of New York, that Paul Newman was reborn. The near-death experience, the guilt, the need to make something of his life, it all poured into his work. He wasn't just pretending anymore. He was searching for truth, his truth. But that truth would soon collide with something else, because Hollywood was about to fall in love with his face and forget the man behind it. The curse of the blue eyes. When Paul Newman first appeared on screen, Hollywood froze. Those blue eyes, bright, unblinking, unforgettable, made him an instant star. But behind that cool, effortless charm was a man fighting to be seen for more than his face. His breakthrough came with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, where he played a man broken from the inside out. The performance earned him an Oscar nomination and turned him into a symbol of raw emotion wrapped in perfection. Then came the hustler and cool hand Luke, roles that made him immortal. Fans loved his defiance, that quiet strength that felt real, maybe because it was. Newman poured every insecurity and doubt into those characters, yet fame brought a price. Color film turned his eyes into a global obsession, and suddenly his looks overshadowed his craft. He joked, "When I die, they'll say, 'Here lies Paul Newman,' who failed because his eyes turned brown." But it wasn't really a joke. He'd become what he feared most, an image. And no matter how many awards came his way, he couldn't escape it. Because the one thing Paul Newman couldn't control was what the world chose to see: love, loyalty, and the bottle. In 1953, during Picnic, Paul met Joanne Woodward, sharp, fearless, and nothing like anyone he'd ever met. At the time, he was married with 3 kids. She knew it, he knew it, and still, something electric passed between them. They went their separate ways for a few years, but fate wasn't done. When they reunited to film The Long Hot Summer, the chemistry was undeniable. By 1958, his first marriage had ended, and he married Joanne in a quiet Las Vegas ceremony that started one of Hollywood's rarest things, a love that actually lasted. From the outside, they looked perfect, but behind closed doors, things weren't always so easy. Paul struggled with alcohol for years, sometimes drinking until arguments blurred and guilt took over. His daughter would later admit those moments nearly broke the family. Yet Joanne stayed, not because she was blind to his flaws, but because she saw something in him worth saving. Paul once said of her, "She gave birth to a sexual creature within me," but what she really did was give him an anchor, something real when the rest of his world was fake. Still, love doesn't erase demons, and the biggest one was waiting, a tragedy that would haunt Paul for the rest of his life, because soon his success wouldn't be what people talked about. It would be the loss that shattered him, the loss that never left him. In 1978, Paul Newman's world fell apart. His only son, Scott, died after a tragic drug-related incident. He was just 28. For years, Paul carried the guilt like a shadow. He blamed himself, wondering if fame, distance, or his own mistakes had pushed his son toward the edge. Friends said he replayed it in his head constantly, searching for the moment he could have changed. Instead of talking about it publicly, he acted. He poured his grief into creating the Scott Newman Center, an organization dedicated to helping young people avoid the same fate. It wasn't about publicity, it was penance. His way of making sure his son's name meant more than tragedy. Still, the loss haunted him. Even in interviews decades later, you could hear it in his voice, that quiet ache that never fully healed. He said once that a parent should never outlive their child, and for Paul, it was the wound he carried to his final days. But from the ashes of that pain, something changed in him. The fame, the awards, the headlines, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was doing good with the time he had left, and that's exactly what he did. The racer, the rebel, the giver. After Scott's death, Paul Newman turned his energy toward motion. Literally, he started racing cars in his late 40s, an age when most men were slowing down. Not him. The same intensity he brought to acting, he poured into the track. And people laughed at first. A movie star trying to be a race car driver? But Newman didn't care. He trained hard, won real races, and even finished second at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the toughest competitions in the world. Racing gave him peace. It wasn't about speed, it was about control. Behind the wheel, he didn't have to be Paul Newman movie star. He could just be a man focused on the next corner, the next lap, the next breath. But the biggest shift came in 1982, when a small joke became a global movement. Newman made homemade salad dressing one Christmas and handed it out to friends. They loved it so much that he decided to sell it, but with one rule: every profit would go to charity. That joke became Newman's own, a brand that's donated hundreds of millions of dollars to causes around the world. Later, he and author A.E. Hotchner expanded that mission with Serious Fun Children's Network, a group of camps for kids battling serious illnesses. This was Paul's new purpose. He didn't just want to act, he wanted to give, to leave something good behind. By the time he reached his 70s, he wasn't chasing applause anymore. He was chasing impact. And for a man who once struggled to find meaning behind his fame, that purpose changed everything. But even legacies built on generosity have one final chapter. And Paul's would end in the quietest, most human way possible. The final goodbye. By the mid-2000s, Paul Newman had done it all. Actor, racer, philanthropist, husband, father. But time was catching up. His health began to fade, and rumors started swirling about cancer. True to form, he brushed them off with humor, saying he was only being treated for athlete's foot and hair loss. In reality, he was quietly fighting for his life. Yet even then, he refused pity. He kept working behind the scenes, stayed close to his wife Joanne, and spent as much time as possible with his daughters. Those final years weren't about Hollywood or headlines. They were about peace. He passed away on September 26th, 2008, at home in Westport, Connecticut, with Joanne Woodward by his side. After his death, parts of his unfinished memoir revealed the truth he'd hidden for years. A man who never saw himself as a legend, only as someone trying to live up to an image he never believed he deserved. Those close to him said he spent his final days apologizing for old pain and finally making peace with himself. He knew his life hadn't been perfect, but it had meant something, and that's what endures. Not the fame, not the blue eyes, but the message he left behind. It's never too late to turn pain into purpose. Paul Newman wasn't just a movie star. He was proof that even icons are human, flawed, haunted, and still trying to do better. The legacy that outlived him. Paul Newman never wanted to be remembered as a star, just as a decent man who tried to do some good, but his legacy refused to fade. Decades later, Newman's Own is still donating millions to charity, and the camps he helped build continue to give sick children the chance to laugh again. His daughters say that's where his spirit lives, not in fame, but in kindness, and maybe that's the real story. Behind the legend, behind those famous eyes, was a man who turned pain into purpose and left the world better than he found it. Because in the end, Paul Newman's greatest role wasn't in a movie, it was in life itself.